All right, welcome to Andscape's latest roundtable. I'm Mia Berry. We have Kayla Sweezy with us, and we have our talented Roden Fellows, Asada Ala Shabazz and Madison Furrow. And we also have Hannah Jones as well on the call. So, a lot has happened at HBCU football this weekend. You have the intense rivalries, and as we all saw, these rivalries kind of went to another level. A lot of fights, notably Jackson State, Alabama State. But on the MEAC side as well, we also had North Carolina Central and Howard players exchanging a little bit more than some pleasantries post game. For you guys, what was your initial reaction to seeing, some of this fighting and escalations off the field?
Yeah, I think seeing these players kind of have these altercations post game just speaks to how much is at stake for both of these conferences, specifically the MEAC following them pretty heavily this season. I think it just speaks to this latter half of the season, these conference games, so much at stake, trying to get a berth to the Celebration Bowl or make something happen for their postseasons as well. So while it is unfortunate, I think it just speaks to how competitive this time of year is.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it goes to show, just bouncing off of what Kayla mentioned, the emotion that goes into this game as well. Um, as far as what's at stake, but what emotion is in there, what is on the line. And as a student, I was kind of shocked. I was really in shock. I wasn't at the game, but then immediately after the fight broke out, I heard because I had some friends that work on the football team, and I was in shock. I was like, what is going on? How did this happen? What's going to happen next? What will be the consequences, if any? So that was my first state of mind and kind of in shock.
Yeah, and I have to say, just being here at Morgan State, it was also just a shocker to see kind of this intensity. Like, this is pure rivalry, I have to say. I think some people kind of underscore HBCU games at times, of not being as intense as other conferences. But these players really put all their passion out into the game. And for the second one with Jackson State, I was actually at the Morgan game, and somebody else in the press room had it open, like the game also playing, and to just see it as I'm watching Morgan's game and Jackson State's game, thinking like, wow, this is going on right now, was just, I was actually like blown. So yeah.
I know on social media it made rounds. You had some people also speaking to that competitive nature, but you also had people on the flip side saying this is not a reflection of who we are as institutions. And they felt like the fights painted, HBCUs and HBCU footballs in a bad light. All of you are wonderful HBCU alums and future HBCU alums. When you see, the fighting, you understand the rivalry, but when you see it go out on a national level and you see people kind of run with these negative thoughts and feelings about HBCUs. What was your initial reaction to seeing some of that play out as well?
Yeah, I think not that it makes it more excusable or any better, but I think just following college football this season, you see that it happens at all levels. So I think to kind of pinpoint it as a specific problem to maybe this conference or a specific school, I think would be unfair. So I absolutely understand the discourse as to why it's unfortunate. It doesn't represent the student athletes or the programs, but I think that's fair to say for all of these schools that are having these fights, whether it's a FBS or it's a PWI. I think that it is just something that comes with how competitive these games are right now.
100%. It definitely comes with what is at stake in these games. And as a HBCU student, as a Howard student, it definitely doesn't represent us correctly. As you said, HBCUs are already kind of shine in the bad light. So it just bringing these fights out kind of shines that bad light even more. But just as being as a Howard University student and going to school there, this is not how we want to be represented. This is not what our athletic program wants to be represented as. And we are a better institution than what is seen on TV. Obviously, there's more to the story. There's more that's inside of it. Like we said, the emotion, what's at stake. It's more than just a brawl or a fight.
Yeah, and I want to say my initial reaction was just wondering what was the story, like how did this start? I didn't get to see the Central game and Howard game, so I was kind of wondering like was this something that had started on the field, then transferred after game? Knowing that sometimes the NCC coach doesn't have his players shake the hands of other teams kind of was a thought in my head. But I would say what people don't see when they don't go to a HBCU is the pride, and is the honor that we wear. So initially, I was just trying to figure out what happened because I know Morgan was last year kind of in not a similar situation, but they had trouble getting into a stadium, and they had this little incident with Norfolk's band. So I was kind of understanding like what happened, what is the story, because I feel like that's not what we have been seeing come across our stream and our social media pages.
Yeah, and also I just want to add like that pride that you talk about, Asada, like we wear our letters strong. Like Howard, Morgan, we wear it strong. And anybody who talks about it, we defend ourselves. So it's also that pride aspect of the things too.
Yeah, and I could definitely see like on social media, especially maybe the alumni feeling like they have to like defend their universities, which I think is so valid. But being someone who is either at the games or watching the games, I think that, like Asada said, it would be helpful to have some context or like, why did this happen? Just the headline being a brawl or a fight or how many players got kicked out or suspended, I think is unfortunate. We're probably not going to get the storyline or all the details, but I could absolutely see why HBC alumni, they always rep their universities and they're going to do what they can to just defend the name because we know how much pride is behind our schools.
Absolutely. Pride and especially the competitiveness that you guys spoke on earlier, someone that's been covering. I remember a lot of these games being intense going back to Central and Howard. There's been a pretty healthy rivalry the last couple of seasons just because, North Carolina Central, they're fighting. They defeated Howard, went to the Celebration Bowl, won it all. Last year, Howard got their lick back. They defeated Central. It ended up going to the Celebration Bowl. So both of these two teams, there was a lot at stake. So I understand, people talking across lines. I've been on the sideline. I've seen it. MEAC football is very intense just because there are only six teams, 5 games. Any drop can cause you to be out. So I kind of get that backstory to feel in emotion. Jackson and Alabama State as well. It's also been pretty intense, pretty heated. Jackson State winning, Alabama State winning, I remember Jackson State people were talking about the slight that they weren't predicted to finish high in the SWAC East. They felt that as a slight. Alabama State was actually projected higher than them. So that kind of talk goes into that rivalry. And of course, my favorite Alabama State, Jackson State moment back when you had Coach Prime. Coach Eddie Robinson at Alabama State came out and said, he ain't SWAC. I cannot tell you how many of those t-shirts I've seen around, both SWAC, Celebration Bowl, MEAC. I saw a couple, Central people wearing that t-shirt when they went against Jackson State as a slight. And that's like the healthy competitiveness, a little smack talk here and there, some t-shirts, a little taunting. But I agree that it shouldn't, I understand emotions get the best of people at times. It probably shouldn't escalate that far, but it did. And as a result, there are consequences. So one thing I've been seeing, out of the Alabama State, Jackson State fight, there were $25,000 fines for both schools and suspensions. 7 Jackson State players are suspended. 9 Alabama State players are also suspended for the upcoming game. North Carolina Central and Howard, that actually doubled. You have 17 athletes from Howard, 19 from North Carolina Central suspended, and assistant coach from Central is also suspended. And, going into the next game, conference season is winding down, but there's still more conference games to play. You have this for Jackson Alcorn State play this weekend. Central, they play their finale against Delaware State. So, for these upcoming games, these actions have consequences. So looking at, who's suspended, we don't know just yet. A list wasn't, given to the public. But when you're looking at this upcoming game, how do you think, these actions are going to impact these 4 teams as they move further on with the season?
Yeah, I think all of these schools that have players suspended are just going to come to terms with, was it worth it? Was the brawl, was the fight, the altercation, whatever was hashed out, was it worth it? Especially once we get more information on who is suspended, it's just too late in the season to be missing key players, to be missing just bodies. As you need players, people are tired, there's injury. I just think that all teams are going to kind of have that conversation. Was any of this worth it?
Yeah, 100%. Was it worth it? And especially with Howard, they're already trying to make it to the Celebration Bowl. That might be on the downslope now, but you still need to win this next game against Morgan. So now that that's going to impact that a little bit with these suspensions, like Kayla said, was it worth it? Was this altercation, even if you had a little back and forth, a little friendly banter, it turning into or escalating to what it did, was that ultimately worth it in the end?
Yeah, and I gotta say something that just kind of been on my mind is just like how many seniors are gonna end up on the suspension list. How many people that were maybe even projected as an HBCU NFL prospect gonna end up on these lists. And just to see that like this is now like what people are tuning into when they should have been tuning in this whole season while these athletes were playing. Um, and yeah, I'm thinking about that upcoming Morgan Howard game. That's definitely been on my heart because Madison was supposed to come down here for that. So I'm over here like, what's the strategy like, Bears? How are we gonna use this a little bit to our advantage? So sorry. Like who is off the roster? But even thinking on the Howard side, like who is going to step up that maybe we haven't seen play as much this season and might be a key player rolling into next season.
I agree with you. And, you mentioned, was it worth it? One thing that we are looking at moving forward, there have been some rumors that, when it comes to the next nationally televised game, like the Celebration Bowl, those post-game handshakes might not happen, as all of you, journalists, Kayla, former student athlete, what do you think about, not doing that final handshake just to keep everything copacetic and peaceful at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's something I've always done. And I think as a student athlete, I think it's implemented for a reason. I think so much happens between, for me, the 7 innings of the game, whether it's a basketball game, softball, football. I just think that you play so hard for while you're on the court, on the field, that the least you can do as respect for each other is just a high five, a fist bump. I love seeing the coaches kind of give their respects to each other. I know that at most college football games, I've seen the players at least kind of go out of their way to connect with the other players, less formal than just a handshake line. But I think it's the best way to show your respect for another player. And despite the deep history with these matchups, these rivalries, these classic games, I think that it's just deserved by both parties.
Yeah, I would say I would not like to see that crutch happen at the Celebration Bowl. I think we are so much more than that. The two teams that will make it up there and those athletes on those teams, I think that they're more than that. I mean, I would say just because this happened during season towards the end, this isn't something that HBCU culture represents. Um, and I don't think I would want to see that happen just because it's saying something that we can't shake hands at the end of a sporting game.
Yeah, and also as a former student athlete, not in college, but in high school. Yeah, I think it shows a sign of respect, and I think at the end of the game, you should be able to control your emotions, bring that all together, and just show your respect for the other team, show your respect for the coaches, and everyone else on the opposite side. So I think that would kind of be unfortunate if that does happen. Like Asada said, I think that it could be deemed as like we can't hold ourselves together, we can't put it together, we can't get ourselves together. When in actuality, it, like I said, it is emotions, it is what's at stake, and sometimes those things do interfere with what we have going on. But as an HBCU student, we don't want that image to be put out there that these HBCU athletes can't hold it together. So
Well said by all of you. Like Madison, I am a former student athlete in high school, and I do remember those handshake lines. I also remember like the composure, like because not everyone is as like respectful. I remember a couple times I'm going through and somebody hit my hand hard, and the person behind me has to tap my shoulder like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And I remember those moments. So it's kind of finding that balance. Also, maybe a cool down period before the handshakes might also be like something effective. Like, don't immediately, especially if it's a close game, you just lost. I don't want to touch you. I don't want to see you. I need at least well, realistically, in my head, I need about 2 business days, but I only need at least 5 minutes. Let me get a little water in my system. Let me say, okay, I played a good game, I lost, then shake the hands. I think that's also maybe something that they can do as well. Don't make it immediate. Give it a second, let people breathe, let people get a little water. Then I also feel like you calm down, you can shake hands at that point, but that's all we have. So this is the end of Andscape's roundtable in terms of HBCU fights. I'm Mia Berry. We have Kayla Sweezy, Asada Ala Shabazz, and Madison Furrow, and Hannah Jones on the call with us as well. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll have a lot more coming, especially as postseason football starts up with the Celebration Bowl.